story. And you already kind of shared a little bit with us and kind of looked back on your diagnosis. And, is there anything that you want to add to that about what the hardest part for you was?
So, first of all, thank you again for having me. And if I could just talk for a few moments, I think about it. The hardest part for me was finding out my diagnosis. Was like, hearing the words, "You're HIV positive," right? And as I told you in the beginning, when I was sharing my little cliffhanger, in case you forgot, I had made myself a promise. Like I was like, we're not having no sex, we're not telling nobody. And honestly, just I in my mind, I was like, I'm not doing a relationship either. Like, we're not gonna do any relationships. We're just not gonna do any of that. And so, just thinking back on that, that was probably the most hardest thing. Is just hearing those words, like, let me bring it further, right? Not just hearing that I'm HIV positive, but just hearing those three letters, right? HIV. And honestly, at the time, being very ill-informed as well, because I wasn't that educated as I should have been, although I wanted to be an advocate, I wasn't as educated as I should have been. So it's like, okay, so are you saying I'm positive? You saying I got AIDS? What are we saying here? And so having to have that conversation as well with my doctor.
Yeah, it's always like shaking to me as a provider to because what happens in that room is that's the only part that your provider is witness to, right? Yep. So it sounds like there were challenges there. I mean, I hear challenges in Absolutely. I'm never gonna. What are some of the things what were some of the daily challenges that you had, and how did you cope with that?
Glad you asked that. So some of the daily challenges that I had, honestly, first starting out because I was uneducated, as I said, was one of my first questions was oh my God, am I gonna have to take all these pills? Because I thought that it was still taking all these pills, 26 pills, those are the horror stories we hear. And especially for those of you who have been living with HIV for a long time, you live that, right? And so in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to take all this medicine, but of course, talking with my doctor that day, understanding that there were other regimens out there. And when I found out my status, the bottle wasn't around yet. So just kind of having that conversation of what my treatment options were. What can I take? What do you have to offer me? And thinking about that. And not only that, but just honestly thinking about the fact that, oh my God, I gotta take medicine every day of my life is what I was thinking, right? Every day I had to take medicine. But I was fortunate, I don't want to get too far ahead of my story, right? But I was fortunate enough to hear this guy say once, and I cannot take credit for his words. So if you post this anywhere, I want him to know that I always give him credit for saying this. That he made this statement, there is no pill to rebuild the will to live. That thing did something for me that day when I heard that. I felt myself get a little emotional. That did something for me that day because I'm like, I'm not ready to die. I'm not ready to die. And so just thinking of the fact that I had a will to live, so beyond having to take a pill every day, I'm gonna do what I gotta do to live at this point. And that's what, that was just a few of the challenges that I could think of and remembering sincerely right away that I had to overcome.
That is really emotional, actually. But inspiring at the same time, and so important for someone who is newly diagnosed to hear. But then, along with your new diagnosis, you've already said it a few times that you didn't have a lot of information, or current information even. So what kinds of questions were there that you had, and how did you ask those questions? What did that look like getting the knowledge?
Absolutely. So in learning about HIV, everybody's story is different, right? As how we process through our diagnosis of finding out. I tell people that truthfully for JoVon, although HIV was one of the worst things that I thought could have happened to me, HIV was honestly one of the best things that honestly happened to me as well. I started really researching information, right? So my first go-to, let me be honest, I did what everybody else do. I went to Dr. Google, right? about to scare myself to death. Went to Dr. Google and about to scare myself to death. And so, of course, what I realized was, I had been to school, so I'm like, okay, we got to find credible information, right? So I'm like, let me go to cdc.gov, let me go to hiv.gov so I can get some credible sources here. And so as I begin to kind of like educate myself in that realm, when I would go to my doctor, I would honestly have straight up conversations. Y'all make me feel like home, so I may say a little bit more than I'm probably supposed to say sometimes. If I'm not supposed to say it, y'all start waving, okay, and be like, cut it off. Okay, so when I first found out my diagnosis or whatever, I was still smoking marijuana, right? So they had told me, they was like, you need to be honest with your doctor. So I'm in there like, look, doc, whatever you give me, I need to still be able to smoke my trees, and I need to be okay. Because you talked about being honest with your doctor, and so like, I went into the doctor and I was like, look, we gotta have a real life conversation here. Like now, my job don't know this, and I can say it now because I don't smoke weed no more, so they can beat me all they want to, and I'm gonna be fine. But like sincerely, like I was like, look, my job don't know this. I didn't tell too many people, but you know now. So make sure we got a treatment, that's gonna be conducive to my lifestyle currently right now. A couple of the other things were, I was always on the go, kind of like I am now, right? I was always on the go, so I'm like, listen, I need something that's going to be simple for me. I don't need to have to stop to do a whole lot, all that good jazz. Just real life having a conversation. And so as I began to educate myself through my doctor, and like I said, Dr. Google. Now I got credible sources. Okay, so let me say that because I see him recorded. People, y'all make sure y'all get credible sources now. Yes. Make sure you get credible sources. Don't just go by everything you read. But sincerely, as I began to educate myself, I started feeling a little bit better, honestly, because I feel like they say it all the time, knowledge is power, right? Mm-hmm. So the more I educated myself, the more I began to feel a lot better about my status. And truthfully, before I even became a representative for Divido or even doing anything with Divido, I got to the place where I was like, boy, I'm over 30. Ain't none of y'all paying my bills. I ain't gotta live for none of y'all. And so at this point, I kind of just began to overcome my own personal stigmas, because nobody talks about that, right? Yep. We can talk about all the stigmas that the world perpetuates, but everybody forgets to remember the stigmas that we already feel internally, right? You're giving me some good questions here, right? So I'm really trying not to get too far ahead. So when I found out my status, like I was about to turn 30. In my mind, I'm like, girl, what was you thinking? I'm like, we done been out here in our 20s, and we done did our thing. We done been here, there, we done been real stupid and not used condoms in our 20s. And how do we get to 30 and we're here? And so just dealing with at the age of I'm about to turn 30, and I'm like, I thought I was smarter than this. Like I thought I thought better than this. But realizing that I could live beyond that, and I didn't have to keep allowing those things that I was feeling and those negative comments. I watch a lot of Drag Race, and so they talk about, your inner saboteur, right? You're that thing, that self-sabotage. I didn't have to keep allowing that to speak to me negatively, where I could really change the story and do something better with my life. I told y'all if I say something I ain't supposed to say, they'll start waving. Somebody catch my attention.
No, I love it because that's a real conversation. Because really, I don't know, probably 90% of our life is really what goes on right here, right? Absolutely. So who was, I'm trying to how do I follow your story here? So who was no, you're good, you did great. Who was the biggest advocate, helping you answer those questions? And please don't say Dr. Google. No, not Dr. Google. No. So honestly,
I had great support system, okay? So when I found out when I first found out about my status, I told you I was at a meeting, right? And I actually went to a meeting, and I wanted to do HIV advocacy, and just, telling people to know their status. The young man that actually did my test was an amazing advocate for me. I remember the day like it was yesterday, y'all. I kid y'all not. He told me that I was HIV positive, but he didn't just leave me there. I remember him specifically getting on the phone, and he called the clinic that I'm still a part of currently to this day. He called them and said, hey, I got this amazing guy who's gonna do great things in HIV. This is literally his words, y'all. He said, I have this amazing guy who's gonna do great things in HIV, and I need to send him to your clinic to get counseling and to get into care. And like to this day, like, and I tell him this all the time because we don't talk as often as we used to. I thank him so much because honestly, if he would have left me to myself, I probably wouldn't have got engaged in care right away, right? Because hearing those words, first of all, was a lot for me. You know, it was just like, you know, I'm turning 30, you're telling me I'm HIV positive. In the area that I lived in, you know, it's just like, you know, finding a clinic, trying to figure out a clinic is like, oh man, like, where am I supposed to go? Where do I supposed to be at? You know, and I'm just like, oh man, like, but he didn't leave me to myself. And then when I got into the clinic, I advocate for this strongly. Any clinic, if you can hire people that are peers, people that are living with HIV, you're gonna do yourself the greatest service that you could ever do yourself, because it's nothing like having somebody that looks like me sitting in front of me to tell me that I'm gonna be okay, that I'm gonna live, that I'm gonna be all right. And if I could say this to my peers as well, if you're in the room, work past your stigmas so that you can be that voice for somebody else, because somebody else needs you. They need you to be in the room. And so my peers at the time that were working in the clinic, they will come in the room whenever I get there, and I'm gonna be honest with you, some days I ain't want to see them. I ain't want to be bothered with them. Like, I did it. But they were the ones who came in, and they were the ones who taught me about U equals U. They were the ones who taught me about, getting to an undetectable status. They were the ones who taught me that, you know, I can live and I can be healthy, living with HIV, and that I could do all the things that I still wanted to do. Because of course I had those questions like anybody else. Am I gonna be alone the rest of my life? I hadn't finished my degree when I found out I was my status. I was still trying to work on my degree. Of course the thought, can I have children? You know, am I gonna be able to have children? All of those things just running through my head. And so my peers really, really helped me to process through a lot of those conversations. And then honestly, my doctor, when I tell y'all, me and my doctor talk about everything. Me and my doctor talk about everything. I say what's on my mind. I ask the questions that I have to ask. Because I feel like, you know, who better to talk with? Number one, he proud about confidentiality. If he go and tell anybody my business, I got a lawsuit, right?
Yeah,
So, you know, since then, I'm like, why not tell the man the truth? Like, you know, like, listen, I got this and this and this going on. Can we talk about this, this, and this? Because let me be honest with you, when I found out my status, I was a single man, right? And after about 6 months to a year, that no sex rule and stuff
went up.
Started changing real quick, right? And so it was real life time to have a conversation with my doctor, right? Like, look, like, what we gonna do? Like, what can I do? What can't I do? Have a real conversation with me, you know, and being able to really process through that information, have real life conversations with my provider, it helped out a lot.
Of course, I love hearing this because I'm a provider, and like, I love patients. I love my patients, and so having those open conversations are so important. But I know, I mean, let's be honest, right? Not everybody has that. So what would you say to someone who maybe they're reluctant to talk to their doctor about everything and all the recreational activities that they're doing and such, and what would you say to them? Because
So Shelly, you may not like my next comment, right? But I'm gonna say it. You have the right to hire and fire your doctor if you don't like them.
Say it louder, please. Say it.
Can I say it again?
Please say it
If you
again.
don't like the doctor, you can get rid of the doctor. You can go to your clinic and say, I don't like her, I don't like him. Can you please give me another doctor?
Yes.
Okay? So, I mean, that's real conversation, right? You know, one of the, and I can't tell her story, but I got the opportunity to have this conversation with Marnina in Miami, and we talked about this real life conversation, right? Like, so first of all, with black and brown people, because like I said, you make me feel like I'm at home, right? With black and brown people, one of the main things that we talk about is what goes on in this house stays in this house, right? Mm-hmm. So we already come with this innate of, you don't get to know all of my business because I'm not supposed to tell you all my business anyway, because my mom and daddy taught me that. They was like, you don't go and tell everybody what's going on with you. That's just not what you do. And so with that being said, I find it that you have to find a provider that you're comfortable with. Find you a provider that you're comfortable with and have a conversation with them. And like I said, if you go into the doctor's office and the provider's being all weird and standoffish, you have the right to say, you know what, this ain't gonna work. Straight up. Just real talk, right? I was fortunate. My first provider was he was of African descent, so he knew a lot about HIV from serving over in Africa, right? Mm-hmm. And so that made me feel really good right off bat, right? But I'll be honest with you. At first, I was a little standoffish with him because he was a black straight man, right? And I'm like, I don't know how he get ready to take this conversation because you know. We about to have a real life talk, and I'm about to tell him some of the stuff that I done, and some of the stuff that I think about doing every now and then, you know. But he took the conversation very, very well, and we became really, really close. Like honestly, we became so close, Shelly. My doctor, I was a part of a Ryan White clinic, so every now and again we had doctors coming from different clinics, and so after like a couple of rotations, sometimes the doctor would rotate out. Me and my doctor was so cool, I was getting ready to follow my doctor to the next clinic that he went to. But I like my clinic a little bit more than I like my doctor. Uh-huh. So I decided to stay with my clinic rather than moving with my doctor. You know, but just sincerely, I encourage anybody, if you don't feel comfortable with your doctor, if you don't feel comfortable with who serves you, you have the right to ask for somebody else. You do.
You do. And I will say, as a provider who has been fired before, not many times, but you know, really a good provider, even if the provider's great, if there's anything that's not good between you, like you have the right to choose.
It's so true.
And the right provider will say, hey, I want you to be with the person that you're the most comfortable with, and that's what's most important. So it sounds like, wow, you stayed at the clinic, your provider moved on. How did you learn about like treatment options?
Oh, that's a good question. So I learned about, I started out on one regimen that was actually three or four medicines, right? And I'll be honest, like I was like most people, if it ain't broke, why we fixing it, right? But I was fortunate enough to get invited to like patient dinners like this, and I also work in HIV, so I went to some things. I guess I went to some things dual roles, like I was a case manager but also a patient. And so being in a actual dinner just like this, they came in and they started talking about Dovato. Now I'll be honest with you, when I first heard about Dovato, I could not take Dovato because it was when I first heard about it, it was only for treatment naive, meaning people who had just found out their status, right? But in my mind, when it says on the thing, I switched because 2 pills was in 1 pill, dead lying. That was the selling factor for me. I was like, oh, it's just 2 medicines in 1 pill, and I can still be undetectable? And they was like, yeah, and I'm like, okay, so why can't I switch? And so, of course, they had to explain to me at the time, well, it's only for treatment naive patients right now, and I'm like, oh, okay. What that mean? So they explained that to me, you know, that it's only for people who have just found out their status. So I was fortunate enough that I kind of kept following Dovato, I'll be honest with you. And then I went to a dinner a few years later, and they said, people who have been on a regimen already can switch to Dovato. Excuse me? Listen, I kid you not, like, my hands flew out right up, excuse me? So what you're telling me is I can switch? Is that what you're telling me? And so, of course, they say what everybody says, right? Well, you know, you have to talk to your doctor about all your treatment options and make sure that this Dovato is a safe medication for you. Same thing I'm going to tell you today, right? You got to talk to your doctor and make sure that Dovato is a safe option for you. But sincerely, I was like, okay, so I can switch. So, baby, I could not wait to get back to the doctor's office. I got to the doctor's office, And I was like, so, I heard about this medicine, right? They said it's 2 pills and 1 pill. How can I switch? Can I be straight up with y'all? My doctor was reluctant at first. Because my doctor was one of those doctors that was sold on it takes 3 or 4 meds to keep you undetectable, right? And so, we had a come to Jesus meeting. I had a different doctor by this time, by the way, because I told you the other doctor had rotated out, so I had a different doctor, and I was like, so what's the problem? So Doc said, I tell you what, give me a few months, let me do my research.
Fair.
Too cool, that's fair. I ain't gonna fight with you. Do your research, because I know what I heard at the dinner. They said I could switch. So,
That's what they said.
you know, and honestly, I had only been on a couple of treatments up until that point. I had only been on like 2 different treatments, 2 different regimens up until that point. And so my doctor did what he needed to do. Of course, you know, he made sure he genome, me, all that good stuff that they do, right? And so my doctor came back and was like, well, JoVon, you can switch. And I'm like, oh, wonderful. Like, not that I didn't think we was gonna do it, but you know, like, okay, thank you so much. But sincerely, I have to be very, very honest in that hearing the 2 pills and 1 medication, because this is what they also explained to me, right? Remember, I found out at 30, right? So probably maybe like 2 or 3 years have passed. And so, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm 33, 34, I still got a lot of life to live. And if we can put less medicine in this body, why not let's put less medicine in this body? Now that's just me thinking logically. I ain't trying to give you no medical advice, okay? That's just me and my logical thinking. I was like, if we can put less medicine in my body, why not put less medicine in my body? And so just making the switch, honestly, was very easy. Once my doctor did everything that my doctor needed to do, did the research behind it, made sure that Dovato was a good medicine for me to switch upon, it was an easy switch. I kid you not, I took my treatment that I had been taking, I took the last pill of it the day before, and then the next day I took Dovato, and I didn't miss a beat.
Okay, so your enthusiasm is really contagious. Like my face hurts. I've been
I try
smiling
not
so
to
much
smile
up here.
so
I know. No, don't. Please don't stop. So I hear like your provider's reluctance there, and that he had to work through that. Like I get that. He needed to do his science part.
Absolutely.
So, and I hear your enthusiasm, but were there other considerations that you had to make? Like, what kind of other decisions had to go into that process?
You know, so for the most part, like sincerely, like just the fact that anything that I do or anything that I consider is considered by my lifestyle, right? I'm pretty on the go. I love to travel. Listen, if I had on some shorts today, you see I got a big old world tattooed on the back of my calf because I love to travel. So it's just one of those things, like anything that I take or anything that I consider, it needs to be able to fit with the way I'm able to go. And it needs to be something that is not going to tie me down. It's not going to take a whole lot of my time. And so just really just really going to the clinic. And then my doctor also gave me some information to read as well, and just kind of breeze through and read over. And if I had any extra questions, like come back to me and then let's talk about this as well. And so I think for the most part, that was pretty much most of the things that we worked through, is trying to make sure that we figured out the regimen that works for JoVon on his lifestyle. And I'd say that to any of you too that are listening, that when you are considering what you consider your treatment options that are available to you, that you literally talk with your doctor about what works for you. Like it just makes sense. Like it's about you.
Yeah.
Like that, at the end of the day, like when you go to your doctor's appointment, it's about, everything is all about you. And it's okay to be selfish in that moment, because it's about your health, it's about your care, it's about your needs. And if your doctor is uncomfortable having a conversation or anything like that, you gotta work through that. You gotta work with that. And then, like I said, if they're not able to get there, then you have the right to get a new provider.
What I do love that, I hope you're seeing like how that fits in with the science that we talked about, right? Like everything that JoVon is sharing is kind of where we were going here in our science conversation. And I kind of feel like you may have touched on this really like about why did you feel the need to switch? But I feel like you kind of went there. Is there anything that you want to add to that? Anything else that came out of the conversations with your provider around switching?
Well, just thinking about when you talk about the science. By the way, I need to say this because you did one of the best medical presentations that I've actually sat in. Y'all give her a hand.
She did.
And I say that because sometimes I sit through these and it's like real sciencey, and we be like,
you don't know what
I
they're talking
kid you
about.
not.
Yeah.
Even I be sitting there like, I'll be glad when they get through this one. But you did a really good job today. No, seriously, we were talking about that at the table. I mean, even from equating to making just real life analogies, like if your pee's the color of that tea right there, we got a problem, right?
Right.
If your stool's the color of this wall, that's a problem. But sincerely, thinking about treatment options and thinking about because like I said, everybody processes through different stages, right? I know of people who, like I told you I work in HIV as well. I know of people who have been positive well over my number of years, and they still have some stigmas, right? Or they know their families. They're still afraid to have the conversation with their family, still afraid to have the conversation sometimes with their children, and everybody processes through that differently, right? The most important thing that I can say from this conversation, or I ain't gonna say it's the most important, but an important thing that I can think of from this conversation is that not only did I get into treatment and my support group with my doctors and the peers that were in my clinic, I'll be honest with y'all, I went to therapy. I am not on any medication for mental health, by the way, but baby, I go to my therapist every 3 to 6 months faithfully, and I talk about all the ignorant stuff that I want to think of and talk about. I talk about my health. I talk about all the things that piss me off. All that good jazz. And sometimes what I find, y'all, is that just sincerely sitting down to talk with somebody, and I bring this up because in Black and brown communities, we don't like to talk about mental health and therapy much, right? Because we talk about that's what other people do. We don't do that. I need you to know that sometimes going to sit down and talk about it with somebody is just the thing you need. It's just the thing that the doctor ordered. There are some times that I go there and sit with my therapist, and I feel like a weight is just lifted off my shoulder because I got the opportunity to just kind of just hash it out. And let me be honest with you, there's sometimes in therapy that my therapist don't give me no answers. I be to talk the answer out of my own head. Sincerely, like we just sitting there talking, and I be upset or aggravated or bothered by something, and half the time I have literally just talked the whole conversation out. She's like, so did you hear what you just said? And I'd be like, girl, yeah, I did. Let me write that down on a pad somewhere. But sincerely, therapy is a good thing, is a good option to consider. And there are options out there to, like I said, it's not about taking a med or anything or adding an extra medicine. Sometimes it's just good to have somebody to talk to. And that's sincere. And I know in Black communities, sometimes we talk to our pastors and things like that. Can I say this? If somebody watching live?
Mm-mm.
Okay, you just recorded. Good, okay. Your pastor ain't got every answer.
Nope.
Let
Not
me
licensed.
say that. And thank you. And they ain't licensed unless they actually went to school for mental health or social work.
Right.
They don't know. And I don't say that lightly because I'm an affirming pastor, by the way. I don't got all the answers for the people, and I'll tell them real quick, well, you need to go to therapy. Because I don't got the answer for that. But a lot of times in our Black and brown communities, those are the first places that we run to. We run to our churches, our pastors, and sometimes we don't yield good results because their reaction is not the best reaction that we needed at the time. And so that's why I mentioned things like therapy, having those conversations. And I kid you not, even with talking to my doctor, he just happened to mention it one day. It wasn't until a year later that I actually decided to actually go and do some therapy, right? He had mentioned it when I first found out I was positive. I'm like, boy, but I ain't going to no therapist. A year later, I was like, maybe I should consider just going to talk to the therapist and see what she talked like, right? And by the way, same rule applies. Because I've had a therapist and I fired her. And I went and got another therapist straight up because I didn't like her. I didn't like how she talked. And I didn't like how she took something I said one day. I was like, wait a minute, who are you talking to? And that was my last day seeing her, and I went, but what I didn't do was, I didn't just fall out of care. I went and found me another therapist, right? And let me say that too, that's the importance of remembering that in hiring and firing your patient care, your doctor, That doesn't mean fall out of care. Please stay in care.
That's right.
Find somebody that's going to care and meet your needs, okay? I try to get balance.
So just like and it's such a great place for us to like put this beautiful bow on it, and I couldn't agree like more. I think that even more, like if you're in therapy, if you need to select someone different for you, that's even more important, because look what you're just talking about, like that world that's right here, that world that lives between our ears. And it just sounds like, gosh, so many things were the right choice for you. It sounds like Devato was
Absolutely.
the right time, the right choice for you. And what you just said, like you switch care but don't fall out of care.
Absolutely.
So will you kind of finish out by talking a little bit about why it's important for you to stay on your treatment?
Absolutely. So I'll say this much. Some of you in this room probably have been positive well before I was. And like I said, we process through our grief stigma, our stages differently, right? As I think about staying in care and I think about HIV and I think about the stigma that's wrapped up around it, I was in the clinic one day and I was talking to one of my patients who had been positive longer than I had been positive. And this little analogy came to my mind as I was talking, right? This is a wall. You used the wall earlier, right? This is a wall, right?
For a different reason.
This is a wall. This is a wall, and this is going to be a wall whether you painted polka dots. It's going to be a wall whether you put stripes up and down it. It's going to be a wall whether you throw crap all up against it. It's still going to be a wall, right? When I think of that, I equated the fact that this wall is a representation of your life. And it's going to be a wall all day long as it's standing.
Mm-hmm.
The paint that's on this wall, if I can equate, HIV is no more than just a speck of the paint that has been put in your life, but it does not dictate the rest of your life. And so with that being said, that's why it's important to stay in care. That's why it's important to stay on treatment, because you want to live out the rest of your life. And you want to do it healthy. There's so many people that truthfully, if I could just looking around the room and I'm being so sincere when I say this, when I look at all the faces around the room, I say this in my church a lot. I may have a little title. I may be the Devato guy that's sitting up here, right? My little face, you see it on the commercial, whatever. But at the end of the day, can I be honest with you? You're gonna meet so many people that I will never, ever, ever get a chance to meet, that I will never, ever, ever get the chance to see. And they need to hear your story. They need to hear somebody say in this area right here in Tallahassee that, listen, you can live. You can be okay. You can finish out the rest of your dreams. You can accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. I need y'all to know that I'm really a little country boy from a little small city. And I would have never imagined, trying to get me right.
Let it go.
Let it go.
I'm sensitive, like I'm from a really little small town. I had never imagined that this little high yellow boy with this long beard would have ever been the person that would be standing up to say, hey, there's treatment options available for you. I'd have never imagined that they would have flew me out to California, right, to record a commercial or anything like that. But sincerely, just realizing that one day I just dared to dream that I could do something, and I kid you not, it was this little bitty flyer for Devato that had an 800 number on it that said, if you want to share your story, call this 800 number. I called the 800 number and said, hey, my name is JoVon. I've been living with HIV, years, and I want to share my story. And from that one little call, like here I am, right? I need you to know that there is so much that's still left for you to do in life. There's still so many lives for you to touch. And that means, and just hear my heart. Straight, gay, person of trans experience, non-binary, whoever you are, my brother, my sister, my sibling. There are so many lives to reach. And people that just really need to hear, your life is worth living. Because if you think about the amount of people who, after hearing the HIV diagnosis, think about just taking their lives alone, it's worth it. It's worth it. And so if everybody in America knows that I'm HIV positive, it's worth it. Because don't none of them pay my bills. I don't got to go home and sleep with none of them. Like, sincerely. You know, if it's worth it to just tell somebody else that, you know, you have so much life to live. You have so many more things that you could accomplish. And if you thought that your story ended, baby, let me be the first to tell you today, your story has just begun. If you hear this little yellow boy today, your story has just begun. And baby, pick up the pen and start writing. You hear me? Don't you dare let nobody dictate you. Don't you dare let HIV dictate to you what the rest of your life is supposed to look like. Okay, I'm done because I can talk fast.